Now, the General Assembly did convene last week, but did not take up changes to the class size mandate. I sat down with Republican Senator Chad Barefoot, who represents Wake and Franklin counties and co-chairs the Senate Education and Education Appropriations Committees, to ask him what's next. Take a look. Well, Senator Barefoot, thanks so much for coming to talk to us about the class size issue. Obviously, it's gotten a lot of attention. Certainly probably no place that's gotten even more attention than right here in Wake County, which you represent in the Senate. Now, you and Senator Berger and others have said that the class size reductions have been funded. I believe Senator Berger said last week $222 million have been allocated. But for next year, for the next school year that would start in August of 2018, there's no funding that has been allocated right now for both class size reductions and to fund specials teachers. Is that correct?
That's right. And as you remember, there was a compromise piece of legislation that was passed in the last session that was almost unanimous in both House chambers and signed by the governor. And it put into motion the current law that we're living under now. And there was an acknowledgement by the General Assembly at that time that to keep going with the classroom size, there would have to be additional funding for what we call program enhancement teachers. So what's been happening in the meantime is the law also directed local school districts across the state to give us data on their classroom teacher situation. So in the law, there are classroom teachers. They're not really delineated by program enhancement or special teachers. So when we ask questions to DPI and say, how many of these people exist, we don't know the answer, the exact answer to that question.
And that's why there's been a little bit, sometimes it's been hard to explain this issue because of the way teachers are funded in North Carolina. Like there's an allocation for teachers, but there's always been a ratio and sort of average class sizes. And so it's specialist teachers, enhancement teachers, whatever we want to call them, art, music, PE, they haven't been separately funded, and the General Assembly did place in the technical corrections budget at the end of last session that you're going to fund them separately. Is that going to happen?
Yeah, that is still our intention, and the process that we're going through right now is collecting the data to determine what the price tag on that expenditure is going to be, and just exactly how we are going to solve that problem. In the 1990s, there used to be two allotments. What we call program or special teachers were funded separately from classroom teachers. And I think it's the intent of us to get back to that situation so that when we talk about classroom teachers as we're going through our budget exercises, we know exactly what those words mean.
Right. Now you've seen the data that's been coming in. Now the estimates that I've read can put the price tag could be north of almost $300 million. Is that something that, when we're in January, I guess is the legislature going to be prepared to allocate that kind of money to the school districts to fund those in addition to funding what's needed to lower the class sizes to meet the mandate?
Well, I think it's certainly the Senate's intent to fund the program enhancement teachers and to create a separate allotment. Now, some of what we're seeing out there as we're going through the data is some school systems are already in compliant with what the law is going to be. Those tend to be smaller school systems, maybe school systems who aren't growing as rapidly. We know that there are pressure points in certain areas of certain urban counties and maybe suburban counties that are growing very quickly. So we're using the data to kind of figure out how we might need to handle those situations. But it is our intent to keep moving the classroom size down because it is the complement to the K-3 reading and literacy goals that we've set for the state. And you and I both know whether a student is able to read and do math well by the end of their third grade year really sets their trajectory for the rest of their learning life.
It's critical, and that's what this issue, no one has ever argued that lower class sizes it couldn't have a positive benefit, for the students. But what people have been sort of turning out, the protests, the other issues that have been raised is the funding and also the timing. We're in January and this money hasn't been allocated yet. Superintendents are having to make staffing decisions. Teachers are having to make decisions on whether they're going to come back or even know if they have a job. Are you not concerned that it's going to be kind of late in the game for a decision like this?
No, what we've been told by the school districts is they start to make these decisions in March and April. And so they were supposed to give us the data in October. It came in a little bit later. We have another round of data that's coming in February. So I know there's a time crunch. This is always the case, though. And we feel like we have enough time to ultimately solve this problem. I think one of the issues that's out there, and one of the reasons why there's a lot of pressure on the school districts right now is because the General Assembly was giving local school districts money every single year to reduce classroom sizes, and they didn't do it. They just didn't spend the money.
Let me ask you about that, because frankly, some of the sort of implication has been that we funded this and you've wasted it on other things. Is this something that you think the superintendents have sort of squandered this money and not spent it on things that were important?
Well, I don't know that I would call it squandering or wasting, but when the state gives you money to lower classroom sizes and you spend it on something else, that's a problem. And it causes problems. And one of the problems you're feeling out there is you have school districts who didn't take the classroom size money for what it was supposed to be used for, and now they've found themselves in a situation where they feel like they have to do too much at once.
They've spent it on teachers. They were spending it on teacher salaries and other things. More beg the question, are the schools just underfunded?
Well, I think we can talk about whether or not they're funded correctly in other areas, and I think that's viable, but the situation that we're in is we know that there were classrooms out there in K through 3 that had as many as 30 students in them. And so if you're telling me that a superintendent was receiving money to reduce those classroom sizes and they decided to spend it on anything else, that person needs to be held accountable. Okay. 30 students in a first grade class, 34, 35 is way too much, and there was some great News and Observer reporting that showed right here in Wake County that you had elementary schools where their average class sizes were in the 30s at some of our elementary schools, and they were taking the money from the state to reduce those classroom sizes.
Well, let me shift gears on that, because this is related. Space. To reduce class sizes, our school systems are going to have to add a lot of additional classroom spaces. Well, just looking at some examples, Wake County, 400 classrooms, which is the equivalent of 14 elementary schools. Onslow County, 87 classrooms. New Hanover County, 48 classrooms. Now, is it feasible or realistic that our school systems could create that many new classrooms to meet this by August?
Well, I think two things. I think one of the reasons why and you name some of the fast-growing areas of the state. One of the reasons they're feeling this pinch is because they did not make lowering the classroom sizes a priority as we've been funding them for the past 3 or 4 years. So when Wake County was going through and doing their comprehensive building plans, they were not factoring in lowering classroom size. And so you have school systems who now feel in a real pinch because they took the money from the state, they did not lower classroom sizes with it, and they also did not plan accordingly. Now, that has created a lot of mistrust between, I think, the General Assembly and administrators in the state. But I think the question you're asking is, well, those are the facts, and so what do we do? Okay. And we are looking at the data, and we totally understand those things. I understand that some of this, whether I like it or not, no matter how upset it makes me, because this was one of the largest spending priorities of the General Assembly and it just didn't happen, we still know that it has to be done in a reasonable way. And I think the data that we're getting is going to allow us to understand better how to get there over the next couple years.
Now let me go a little bit further on that. Do you believe that the school superintendents were actually using the money that was allocated to them for something inappropriate, or that they squandered it in some way? Or, again, they were granted flexibility by the General Assembly, to spend the money the way they thought was best for their district. Do you think that this is, something, illegal or inappropriate was going on?
I'm not suggesting that they wasted it or that they did something illegal. What I'm suggesting is we gave the money to them for a specific purpose in this area, and it wasn't used in that area, and now you're starting to feel the consequences of not spending those dollars correctly, is all that I'm arguing.
Got you. Just to wrap up the conversation around class size space and the enhancement teachers, Is it your belief that the General Assembly will move forward and fund enhancement teachers and fund the class size mandate, but not provide resources for the classroom space that will be required?
Well, the school building size is, I mean, that's always been a responsibility of the locals. We pay for the teachers, we pay for the curriculum, and our local LEAs, along with their county commissioners, they pay for the classroom, the actual physical spaces of the classroom. Will those things be taken into consideration as we work on a solution? Absolutely. But we have to get serious. I mean, we can't, the General Assembly, who gives most of the money for public education in North Carolina, cannot continue to be in a situation where we make large investments, large expenditures, and those things go unheeded. And it's very important for I mean, the governor's got a education task force out there, education task force all over the place trying to figure out how to do this better. And we can appropriate it better, certainly, but if it's not spent the right way at the local level, you'll have no idea what you are really getting for what you're doing in terms of public policy. And that's a real problem we have to address.
Now, one of the things you've talked about today is about the need for oversight and accountability. You said the superintendents, the school districts receive money, and then they didn't use it for the things you intended. Now, when it comes to oversight and accountability, the General Assembly is also giving a lot of money to things like private school vouchers. About $1 billion in funds are earmarked to go to these private schools, and in fact, we reported out on this show that the single largest recipient of private school vouchers, Trinity Christian in Fayetteville, embezzled money from the state. They have an employee who is in jail but also still teaching at the school. I mean, doesn't that sort of beg the question that if there's any oversight that's needed, it's actually in a program like that?
Sure. And you guys broke that story. I think it is something we definitely need to look at when we come into the short session about the kind of the quality control on some of the administrators in these private schools. I think that's absolutely a fine conversation. I will, though, say that that money is going to the student, and there are parents involved in those choices as well as the state of North Carolina. And when we talk about accountability with private schools, you know, you've read the legislation. It's only been in place for about 3 years. We needed that time to collect data, and in terms of academic quality, we'll be getting there very soon.
Last question for you. You're not seeking re-election. I'm just curious what's next for Senator Chad Barefoot. You have any plans to run for another office?
Well, I still have a year on my term, which I plan to faithfully serve out. But ultimately, you know, that's kind of a decision between my family and I. And I don't mind sharing this, but my wife and I, we've had 3 children in the past 5 years, which is how long I've been in the General Assembly. And being a daddy for the next little while is really a priority of mine, especially as my kids enter school.
You've got little ones, all under 5, right? And you've got a job at Lewisburg. So, well, look, we appreciate you sitting down with us and talking to us about this. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Keith.
Thanks. We appreciate Senator Barefoot sitting down with us. When we come back, we'll be joined by Senator Rick Horner and Harnett County Superintendent Dr. Aaron Fleming.